Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Jenni. Thank you for making the time for us, Jenni. I know you've told me you've got some consequential meetings today. So hopefully this is going to be a nice, gentle way into what you've got later on, which is a bit heavier. So welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Simon. I expect that this will be the easiest part of my day. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to try and make that as easy as possible. That's my mission. That's my mission for the next hour. So I'm going to make this as easy as possible, and hopefully as insightful as possible. Because if we're making it, I heard something once. Kids learn more when they're having fun. And I thought that must be the same for us then, as adults. We must all learn more when we're having fun. And if we're having an easy conversation, then hopefully we're having more fun, and hopefully that will flow over into the listeners. They'll have fun as well. And I have to admit, as I was saying to you before, Jenni, I've been spreadsheet wrangling for the last half hour, 45 minutes. So this to me is far more fun. And I'm in a slightly unusual mood. So hopefully we can have even more fun. So could you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Jenni?
Sure. So Jenni Lord, I'm the CEO and founder of an organization called Chosen, based in the US. In the San Antonio, Texas area. I founded the organization 13 years ago, and our mission is to help children heal from trauma by strengthening their families. It's an absolute joy and privilege to do this work, as difficult as it is, and I am just honored to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. A joy and a privilege. Spot on, and challenging as well, as you said. Those things don't often get put together, do they? We don't see joy in challenge a lot. Those two things don't seem to get put together.
Well, I think we're made to do hard things, and we have to fight our own human nature to choose comfort over the hard thing. But the hard things are where the reward and joy are found. And as a former marathoner, I can attest to learning a lot of those lessons through many miles,
yeah.
Knowing what it was like when you cross the finish line.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that did the marathoning, did that reveal your inner strength that you didn't know you had, or did it make you stronger, or how would you see that?
That's a good question. I've answered a lot of questions about running and racing and marathons, and no one's ever asked me that. I think it's both. I think I tapped into a reservoir of strength I didn't know that I had, and I also think it made me stronger in the training and grittier to push through. Somebody asked me one time, so what happens if you're 20 miles into the race and you want to quit? I was like, well, that's not an option. So I think just learning that quitting wasn't an option, it definitely refined that in me.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a break I'm going to take a go at breaking that down. So we've got you've got the physical strength, and then you've got the mental strength. And it sounds to me like the physical strength got strengthened, but the mental strength was always there.
No, I think, it's like, I would say both were strengthened. Oh. So if you work out a muscle, the more consistently you work out that muscle, the stronger it becomes, where something that was very difficult to do 6 months ago becomes easier. And in both cases, I was learning to flex physical and mental muscles and strengthen those over time, that it became easier to do.
Okay.
With consistency, right?
With consistency. Okay. So I've got a slightly different take on that. I'm trying to think. I definitely agree with the physical stuff. Definitely agree with the physical stuff. But I'm just trying to think of how. So the best I can go with the resilient stuff is, in my opinion, is a metaphor I use for this is Michelangelo, the painter and sculptor. He was asked how he created David, which is a big statue in the north of Italy somewhere, and he said, well, he just had David was always there. He had to chip away at the non-David, which was the stone on top of that, and that's how I kind of like it. So it's a process of unlearning. I think we're all we're all born resilient, and then we kind of learn fragility, and then we kind of refined our resilience. But I understand that that's quite a countercultural view on this. Does it make any sense?
It's a profound analogy, and thank you for such a beautiful picture. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think, you talked about the mental and the physical strength. For me, I also gained spiritual strength in that marathoning. And so learning who I was created to be, and drawing on that strength forged it gave me mental fortitude in the training. So it's both and, not either or.
Okay. So now we're talking spirit, and this is my love, right? So the spirit, so I often talk about the fact that this French guy said we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and that spirit, that life force of who we are, that's the thing that's revealed in this hardship. The hardship of raising kids from tricky places, tough places, the resilience to keep going on a marathon. And I'm a swimmer, not a runner, and I've never done more than a couple of miles swimming. So I'm talking from experience here. Or and the resilience to keep going, as I'm sure you've had to do in your 13 years of running Chosen. That spiritual resilience is sorry, the resilient essence of our spirit is the thing. It is the wind in our sails, rather than the strategies and mindset stuff that people sell us, really.
Yeah, there's places for that, right? Strategies and mindsets. Those are important things to unpack at times. But when you gain resilience from experience, when you fight battles and you defeat your own self, your own thoughts, when you press forward, you can draw on those experiences to fuel you in the face of another fight. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So before we started recording, you summed up one of the themes, one of your beliefs, that healing comes from attachment. And I was wondering if you could break that down.
Sure. Can I give a little context for where that?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, by all means.
So when I started the organization, my heart was, I just wanted children and families, and my heart was broken for kids who weren't growing up in a family. Kids don't belong in a system, and they don't belong in institutions. They belong in families. That was God's design, as children and families. So initially we were helping children get into safe, loving homes. And about 5 years into that work, 5 or 6 years into that work, I saw a very disturbing trend across the US where good-hearted, well-meaning, good-intentioned people had opened their hearts and homes to bring a child in and were wholly unprepared for what they were saying yes to, and then didn't have what they needed for the long-term support to be successful. And because of that, people were disrupting their adoptions and putting kids back into the system, rehoming children. People were saying, I can't do this foster care thing anymore. This is too hard. And they were putting kids back into the system, and it was just heartbreaking. And so for me, it was a new phase of the journey of, okay, I see a gap in the market that we can't do everything, but we identified somebody from a stewardship responsibility standpoint, that somebody was us. Somebody has to help these families be successful long-term and have what they need to help their children heal from what they've experienced. And so that started a new chapter to the organization Chosen, which was, we wanted to equip families to help their children heal and stay together so that children were not re-traumatized going into a new home and suffering another loss. So that led us organizationally to figure out what are the best practices to equip families for this journey that has been marked by trauma. And in that discovery, we learned about attachment theory. I have a background in counseling, so I knew about attachment theory, but the essence of it is attachment, that healing comes from attachment to a safe, loving caregiver. And Simon, you have a very different experience than some of the families that we work with. But regardless of whether a child has experienced loss, whether they've experienced abuse, neglect, abandonment, there is a primal wound of loss because they've been separated from their biological family. And so every loss has to be grieved at some point. For some of us, that is young in life. Some of us, that's a long journey of healing, because grief, as we know, is not sequential necessarily, and it isn't predictable, but every loss has to be grieved. And so we are helping families understand that their children have experienced a loss of separation from their first family and how to navigate that so that they can help their children heal and have restored relationships.
Yeah. So there's the relinquishment loss, and there's these days increasingly, because adoption happens later, there's the trauma that kids have been through before they've been adopted, if they've been adopted out of foster care. And it's kind of impossible, isn't it, to separate the two. Is it necessary to separate the two? Is that even necessary in your experience?
Well, we want to honor everybody's story, and everyone's story is different. And it's very complex. What we're talking about is very complex. I have a friend who, he's almost 40. He had a wonderful adoption story. He had wonderful adoptive parents. He never felt like he had had a loss until he started nearing 40, and he realized there were these pieces of his story that were unresolved and a history that he didn't know. And, you know, he had to confront some things. And I guess that's what I would say, is that the loss, whether it was at birth or it was later in a child's journey, the loss causes these fragments in our soul that have to be reconciled at some point. And so that's why what you said, does it matter whether which story it was? What matters is that if you boil it down to loss and grief, adoption is very beautiful, but it comes from brokenness. And so you have to boil it down to the loss and grief that has to be recognized, that child has experienced. We can't just gloss it over like, oh, well, now they're in a safe, loving home. Well, depending on their past experience, they may not feel safe at all. They may not, even if it's loving, it's still not what they still have a desire maybe to go back to their birth family. So understanding that and helping families understand that is really important, because I think that adoption and even foster care have both been glorified to some extent culturally, and we have to recognize they're both, there was loss before that.
Okay. So your friend's story mirrors mine, really. So I didn't have any challenges till I hit 40, and then some stuff came out. So that's kind of why I asked the question, really, because I'm aware that it's a whole. The more trauma we've been through, the more trauma we've been through.
Sure.
So what are the most important, because I know a lot of your work is therapeutic. Yeah, would you sum that, would that be a word that you would use to describe it?
Yes, there's absolutely a therapeutic nature to it. We say parent coaching. We do therapy on our staff, and we outsource for therapy, but we also, in essence, do parent coaching, which is really equipping caregivers in the trenches with tools, tactics, strategies, and really fundamental parenting that is going to help them connect with their child in their home to overcome maybe the behaviors that they're facing, but ultimately to connect. Like Simon, we are designed for connection. And what we see oftentimes is that these kids come into the home and they're completely missing, the kids are missing the parents. They're not operating on the same frequency. This parent is trying to do good, and the child is, acting out in ways that are unbecoming and actually rejecting the parent's love. And so we help to bridge that gap with those tools. So some of them are therapeutic, some of them are very practical, but evidence-based. Yes.
I when I first saw your website, before I got in touch, the evidence-based nature of it, I rang out. It hit me right between the eyes, in a good way, obviously, because we all want evidence. So when you deliver that parent coaching, is it a coaching conversation? Is it more like a classroom? What does it look like?
Great question. So let me back up a couple of steps and say that we serve really 4 different types of populations. We serve adoptive parents, foster parents, kinship, relatives who are raising their kin, and then we serve families who can be safely reunified, who've been touched by the child welfare system. And parents come to us typically in distress, oftentimes saying, we don't like this child, we want to put them back, will you help us find a new home? Or I can't handle these behaviors, they're out of control, we've tried everything, we've been to counseling, we've been to all types of therapists, we are at our wits' end, we don't know what to do. And so their starting place is oftentimes desperation for just trying to learn how to connect with their children and really find peace in their home. People say, what are they looking for? They're looking for peace. They want the chaos to stop. It affects their biological children, it affects their marriages. And so they come to us in a place oftentimes in distress, crisis, and really hopeless. And so, number one, we're going to restore hope. There is hope. We've worked with hundreds of families and seen children heal and brought restoration to situations that would make you cry. You're like, this sounds impossible. So we know it is possible, and we want to make sure the very first time that a parent connects with us, they have a taste of hope that things can improve. So after that, we do a number of clinical assessments to see the parent stress level in the home, to see the trauma symptoms that are prevalent, whether that's anger, depression, PTSD symptoms, what have you, in a child. And we do something, this is a big word, called biopsychosocial intake. What that means is we just take a history of the child and the family, the parents, because it's not just the presenting child that is the issue. A child is in a family system, and we bring things into relationship as parents or caregivers that are impacting that child in ways that we may not even be aware of. So we're going to do that history intake, and then we are going to develop something called a trauma-informed action plan. And that plan is going to be customized for that home. And we're going to address the 5 developmental needs of a child. So you and I talked about this previously, but those things are social, emotional, educational, relational, physical. We're going to address all of those developmental needs of the child, but we're also going to address the other things, the factors that are going on in that home that need to be addressed. And with that plan, each family would be assigned to a care manager. We call them care managers instead of case managers. Nobody wants to be a case. And they're going to meet with that care manager on typically a weekly basis and walk through the plan together. And we help develop weekly action plans that are going to help them achieve what is in that plan. So some of that's parent coaching, some of that's education about how trauma impacts the brain, about the family system, dealing with things in the parents' past that may be unresolved. So every family is unique, but it is going to be dependent upon that plan that was created for the individual family.
Wow. So this is clearly as you said, evidence backed up, highly thought out, tested and proven approach for an ongoing solution. So given the fact that we're just having a conversation here over Zoom and sharing that as a podcast with the listeners, what are the most important things that you'd like to share from what you've learned and from all the work that you do with the listeners?
Yeah, so it would be a continuation of what I was just talking about. You said, what does that parent coaching look like? And for anyone who has been in this space for any length of time, and Simon, I may have even shared this with you before, I really don't like the phrase trauma informed because it's very watered down. Even trauma is watered down. Like, what are we talking about? And we have families who've come to us, they've been through training, they've been to conferences, they've read the books, but they don't know how to apply the knowledge in their own home with the child that is in front of them. And we all have defaults, right? I came into parenting There was no class for my parenting of my 4 biological children. I just was doing the best I could with these little people, trying to navigate how to discipline and how to encourage, and how to strengthen them, and help them find self-confidence. Well, a lot of that, my parenting was based on what I had seen growing up, and parenting from a place of, you do what I say because I said it, because I'm the parent. Well, that type of parenting doesn't work with children who've experienced trauma. Children who have experienced trauma in their past, particularly if it's abuse, neglect, if you're talking about kids in the foster care system, they don't have any reason to trust an adult. Their primary caregiver, their most sacred relationship has been severed because the child has been harmed in some way. So they come into it oftentimes with cortisol flooding their bodies, excuse me, living in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. And we're going to work with the parent just to connect with the child, to first establish trust, so they can have felt safety. Excuse
me. Yeah.
So that parent coaching, it really is, I mean, we have to start where the parent is. If they've had trauma-informed education, we're going to build upon that knowledge and teach them how to apply the knowledge in their own home. If they don't have that at all, which we definitely see that for families who've experienced, if they've adopted internationally, they've probably had very little training. For kinship relatives, typically in the US, they've had almost no training around trauma and the impact on the brain and the psyche of that child. So we're going to start where the parent is and equip them from there. But it is about, we have to move from being trauma informed to being trauma responsive. I'll give you an example. One of the biggest parenting go-to strategies is timeout. Child is acting out of control, throwing a temper tantrum. And you say, you have to go to timeout until you can calm down, right? We start using that with toddlers. We start using that very young ages. Well, for a child who's experienced rejection and loss, sending them away is the last thing they need.
Yeah.
Excuse me. They need to feel connection. And so we would teach a parent how to do time in. Hey, Charlie, I can see you are really unhappy. I want you to sit right here with me. Sometimes you can't even talk because their executive brain is offline, right? They are in that fight, flight, or freeze state. They are having a complete meltdown. And maybe it's just holding the child and diaphragmatically breathing so that they can feel your breath and their heartbeat can slow and match your pace, or it's breathing together. I used to do that with my son. I would hold him from behind and I'd say, do you feel my belly? I'd breathe deep and then exhale deeply. And I would wait until his breath matched mine instead of sending him away. Because if you're sending a child away when they're dysregulated, all they're going to learn is self-reliance, that they can help themselves calm down, versus the parent or caregiver that's designed to give them care. With our children, they have to learn to receive care and give care. That's oftentimes very difficult for children who've experienced trauma. So that's just a small example, but can make a huge difference, because what we want to communicate to that child who's been traumatized is, I am with you. I am here with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to reject you and send you away. Even if those aren't your words, that's the feeling, right? Go away from me. Yeah. So it's a small example.
Okay. think I just want to take you back a little while to what you said about applying the knowledge. So it's important that parents are applying the knowledge. So what I'm getting from that is what came to mind as hearing you talk was that so we're a parent and we're struggling. We might be trying to take on more and more information in the hope that more and more knowledge is going to, we're going to find the key, the key to the peace and the end of the chaos that we're looking to think about. And we're just going to keep on reading more books, essentially. We're going to keep on watching more videos, listening to more podcasts, in the hope that we'll finally get the key. Whereas what you're saying, from what you said, that key might be actually learning to apply what we already know, which is a skill, rather than trying to take in more information, which is knowledge and understanding. So we might be listening, we might be searching in the wrong place, because when we think it's about what do I need to do, when it's not, it's really it's a matter of how do I need to apply what I know. So there may be there may be a misunderstanding between the what and the how. People are focusing on the what when they should be perhaps looking at the how. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Simon, I think you should do a commercial for us.
Okay.
No, that was really good. So going back to that trauma-informed action plan, we break it down into weekly action plans with the families. And one distinct difference from us versus other service providers is we use something called dosing methodology, which is based on Dr. Bruce Perry's research and his experience. He's a leading clinician in our field, and he says that people heal when they are in charge of the duration and frequency of their treatment. So we allow families to come to us as often as they need, aside from that 1 hour scheduled appointment. If their kid's having a meltdown, they're like, I do not know what to do. I'm dysregulated myself. Like, I need help in the moment. They can call us in the moment. So I didn't say this before, but we do telehealth. We've been doing telehealth for 5 years, long before the pandemic, and very effectively using that dosing with parents. But that plan has weekly action plans. So every week, the parents are going to have homework. And then the next week, their care manager is going to hold them accountable. How did it go when you tried this? And they're going to talk about it. So it's those baby steps. You're taking this information that you know or that you're learning, applying it in your real life. What is the most difficult thing you are struggling with your child today? We're going to tackle that. And then next week, if that's still the problem, we're going to tackle it again. We're going to make progress on the things that are most burdening families so that we can make the progress, right? So it is breaking it into those little bite-sized pieces and applying that knowledge, holding the parents accountable to what we're teaching them. And they see, that's how they regain hope, because they actually see the change happening before their eyes. And by implementing what they're learning or what they have learned and applying that in their home, they're starting to see how connection, true, deep, authentic connection, relational connection is possible with their child. We had a dad last week, incredible story. They adopted twins out of foster care at 3 years old. Children have been in the home for 9 years, and the wheels are coming off. Completely coming off. They wanted to send one of the children away to a residential treatment facility to stay there. They said, she is trying to ruin our lives. That's not uncommon for us to hear that. And she's 12 years old. So her purpose in life is not to ruin her parents' life, right? And that dad, through a series of several months of working with this family, they have made tremendous progress. But this dad told us the sweetest story. He said, I remembered how much I loved Emily's laugh. She has the best laugh. And I had completely lost that in just trying to survive with this kid that we thought was trying to run our lives. So it's just an example of how once they start connecting and there's relational restoration, you start to see the child again for, like you said before, you start to see that play, you start to see who they are and how they were created to be. But sometimes that gets buried under all of the muck.
Yeah. So what would you say to that? So you offered me a job doing a promotion for you. Now I'm going to go the other way and do you out of a job. Not at all. I'm looking for a kind of like a little idea that comes off, a little idea or a big idea that comes back off the conversation. So if this idea listener is, if the listener's thinking, well, actually, it may be about how I apply what I've learned rather than what I've learned. What could that parent do? Can you give an exercise or an idea of what something a parent could try out on the back of that?
Definitely. So one of the things that often shows up in our action plans for our families is just having 10 minutes of one-on-one time with your child. Let them direct 10 minutes of one-on-one time. That one-on-one time is critical for bonding, critical for that attachment to happen. And, we have families that they don't want to spend any time with their child. They're trying to figure out how they could put them in more activities because they can't stand to be around them. So 10 minutes can oftentimes seem like a lot when depending on what's going on in the home. And that might look like playing dress up with them, letting them put your makeup on. It might look like throwing the football together or hitting the baseball together. 10 minutes of child-directed one-on-one time. This is our time. This is our special time. You tell me how you want to spend this time together. And you don't get to correct the child during that time. You don't get to suggest something else. 10 minutes of child-directed time. Because these kids, they have lost all sense of control. That's why there's so much fight in them. They're fighting for control. So when you give them this little bit of control to direct that time together, that can be a relational win. And if you do it every day, you'll see progress in your home. But Simon, I want to be really honest about something that I haven't said before. We work primarily with the caregivers, and that is because we're equipping the caregiver to be an agent of healing in their own home. They're the adult. So our work is with the adult. It's not just, a kid heals in a therapy office. A child heals in a family system. So we have to equip the adults who have the executive functioning to carry out these measures that are needed.
So I'm totally with you on this. And on two things I want to, because I did a lot of work in elementary schools, nothing to do with adoption. But my starting point always was asking the kids what they wanted. So the particular one of the workshops I used to run was, what's your dream? So that might be a short-term dream, like break into the school team, or that pass a piano exam, or something like that, or it might be a longer-term dream. What they wanted. So giving kids agency, as in you use the word child directed. So asking them what they want is incredibly powerful. and it is part of that, as you say, that coach, I would say that's a coaching approach. That's the child, that's the parent coaching the child. What is it that you want? What is it that you want? What is it I want you to, in your example, what is it that you'd like to do for 10 minutes for the pair of us to do for 10 minutes? Or in my sense, what's your dream? And then what do you need to do to make your dream come true? And who do you need to be to make your dream come true? It gives the child control. It gives the child it gives the child agency. It engages the child in the process, where most of the time, most of kids' lives is spent without any control, especially during the school day, for example, because we've got these curriculums that are set by in the US, they're set by the state. In the UK, it's set by England. In Scotland, it's in England, it's set by England, the English national curriculum, Scottish national curriculum, Welsh national curriculum, and those and the teachers have to teach to that, and the kids have got no agency. They've got no control whatsoever. It's no wonder they're not engaged in the class, because it doesn't mean anything. If to put it bluntly, if the child wants to be a YouTube blogger, a vlogger when they grow up, or then studying maths, as we say in the UK, it's not going to appeal to them. And there's a bigger thing here in terms of meeting our kids. A lot of people talk about meeting our kids where they're at. You can meet them where they're at, but the best place to actually engage a child, I've found, is to find out where they want to be. And that way they're engaged. A coach. So I've had a lot of business coaching. The coach says, where are you now? Where do you want to be, Simon? Where are you now? I can help you get the difference. That's what coaching is about. It's about engaging people. So that came through very strongly. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Simon, I think every family's journey is different, and so it really depends on where you're starting from, because there are sometimes the child doesn't know. You could say, what do you want to do for 10 minutes? And they really don't know. They need suggestions. They need like an idea, like here's some ideas of what we could do, because they've had so much fear and so much loss of control. Like they can't even creatively think about what they might want to do. So that's one possibility. A second possibility is, well, let me interrupt myself and say, we do know that where they want to go, every child, every human wants to feel safe and connected. They want to feel safe, connected, and loved. So that's an easy one. But honoring where the child wants to go is so important. We had a family that had adopted their fourth child. Their first three kids were a little bit older, and all of the kids had played baseball or softball, the older children. And mom was kind of done with baseball and softball. Like they had played it for so many years, they'd consumed so much of their lives. She was ready to move on with that chapter. They had a younger child, around 6 or 7 years old. She started doing the child directed one-on-one time. And the only thing the little girl wanted to do was go outside and throw the ball like her older siblings.
Of course.
And she saw that as a way to connect with mom, but also from an identity standpoint, I want to be like the rest of my family. She didn't have the same biological bent, but she had seen the family connectivity through her own eyes for years. So where she wanted to be was like her siblings. That was where she wanted to go. And we had to really work with mom, because her own self was getting in the way of like, I want to be done with these sports. I don't want to do that anymore. And yet that was the only thing her daughter wanted. Yeah.
Well, if that's what she's seen her siblings do, then that's what. Well, as you say, not everyone's going to be the same, but that's going to be what she sees, because we all want to, we all want to grow up, don't we? We're all in a rush to grow up. Well, until we become grown up and we figure out it was actually better before. But that we've got to be aware. I mean, that kind of leads into the other point that I think that you were making that I wanted to underline. It's about us, so often I see and hear, and this is, I've done work with non-adoptive parents as well. So we think it's about the kids when really it's about us.
Yes. What we find is, everybody take a deep breath, but oftentimes when families come to us, it is the parents that are the issue, not the child. And unfortunately, the ground around the child has been scorched, and people don't want to be near them because of whatever behaviors they're having. And the parents come to us and they've lost empathy for the child's story because of those behaviors, because of the things that are driving a wedge in that relational connectivity. So the onus of responsibility really is on the parent to connect, because a child doesn't have the mental faculties to initiate and do all of that on their own. And in fact, they're oftentimes acting in ways that are very much rejecting the parent's love that they wanted to give. So it is about us. It is about doing the work ourselves. And I've had to learn this as a parent myself, and learn that my way or the highway, because I said so, like, that is not effective for relational connectivity. Nor do I want to be an authoritative parent that is communicating that to my child. Their opinions, their thoughts, their insights do matter. And I've had to rework my own parenting based on what I've learned in this field.
Yeah. So I've heard this phrase from a mentor of mine. It's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. So obviously that mum was struggling, whose daughter wanted to play ball, and she didn't want to play ball. She's got a blind spot to, I'm going to use a bit of I can't think of a simpler word, but she's been a bit intransigent. She's got a blind spot. So what are the blind spots that you see in adoptive parents?
Well, that's a big can of worms, Simon, but I'll say this.
We're not judging anybody, by the way. I've got lots of blind spots too.
Sure, as do I.
We're not judging. We wouldn't judge a blind person because they're blind. So we're not going to judge a sighted person because they've got a blind spot.
Absolutely. We all have blind spots. You're absolutely right. I think we all carry things into relationships that we're unaware of. We have default patterns of thinking, default patterns of behaviors that sometimes are counterproductive. They're counterproductive in our adult relationships, and certainly they're counterproductive in our child relationships where there's a power differential. So the blind spots are unique to each individual based on your history. But one of the things that, and this is why we take not just the history of the child, but the history of the parents. One of the things that we see over and over again is oftentimes the parents or caregivers have their own unhealed trauma in their past that hasn't been dealt with, that is playing into the relationship with their child, and it's preventing them from connecting the way that they need to. And we have to confront that. And so we do that in a gentle way. We're not, it's not in your face, but we are going to hold parents accountable to that work. And that history is going to be really important. An example of this is we had a parent, they adopted a child who was 13 years old out of the system. He had been in the system for 10 years. Lots of homes, lots of institutional living. He had a really tough history. And, they came to us about 2 years after adoption, really struggling with some big behaviors. And like any boy, he needed to move. All he wanted to do was play basketball. And so I'm like, okay, mom, to keep him out of trouble, he needs to play basketball. He needs physical activity every day. So they started playing basketball, and kudos to her. Basketball was not her thing, but she did it to connect with her son. Right. And through that, what was revealed is that every time he touched her physically, she was getting triggered to the point of, get off of me, like, don't hug me, don't touch me, and which was really preventing that connection that we were after, that attachment. And we're like, okay, so we had to deal with what was in mom's past, which was she had sexual abuse in her history. She had never had counseling. She had never dealt with that. And so physical touch for her was not a safe way to express love. And yet her son, who had been in the system for 10 years, desperately needed that touch. So we had to work with mom to resolve what had not been dealt with in her own past, that she was carrying into that relationship with her child, because he needed that physical touch. So that's just an example of how a blind spot is now impacting your relationship with your child. That we started off this conversation, Simon, talking about unresolved loss with the children, right? That's the subject matter here. But even within ourselves, we have unresolved things that they have to be resolved to be healthy, to have healthy relationships.
Yeah. So this unhealed trauma, I mean, it can be, obviously it can be very deep, and sometimes not as extreme as that. I want to just draw attention, if this sounds like it's an area that you want to dig in to, listeners, there is an episode of the podcast in the back catalogue by Holly Ann Petrie, and it's called something like Unpacking Our Own Baggage as Adopted Parents, and it's where she talks about what she's learned. She's an adoptive foster mum, bio mum, and she goes into this in depth. So if that sounds like you want to explore that, Holly Ann's personal insight and her vulnerability and what she learned about that is an absolutely superb episode. And funnily enough, people are asking me now, okay, Simon, I'm interested in becoming the podcast. What is it that you want to talk? What is it that you want me to talk about? And I'm erring more towards this side, because I think that I know it starts with us. So me and my wife haven't got any kids, right? But I know it's about me, not about my wife. I can influence myself more easily than I can influence my wife. It starts with me. It's all that stuff that's far too easy to say. All those like put our own gas, oxygen mask on first. Like it's a cliche, and it's a cliche because it's true. It's true. It does start with us. And the idea that's popping into my head is something that I did from a business perspective, actually. The mentor, the guy that said, it's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. After he said that, he recommended that we, the people on this course, actually invited feedback or feed forward from other people to see whether to get somebody else's take on our own blind spots. So that's a thing that we can do, obviously in a very loving, move forward way. I said the word feedback, well, and then I immediately changed it to feed forward, because feedback's about the past and we can't change the past. Feedback's about the past. Feed forward is I don't want any feedback. I want to feed forward. I want to know what I can do better, how I can become a better husband, how I can become a better podcast host, how I can become a better interviewer, how I can develop more empathy, how I can, all that. That's what I want. I want to move forward. I want to move forward towards that hope bit. So
yeah, Simon, I didn't share this at the beginning of the podcast, but my personal passion was birthed out of my own personal journey. I have a brother that was adopted out of foster care. He came into our family when I was a freshman in college, and he was a toddler. His adoption took almost 5 years to complete. And I saw the inside of the child welfare system and how a system that was designed to protect children could often hurt them. And that was where my passion began. And my mom was like so many families that we encounter. She was young and just felt like she had more love to give. And we tell parents all the time, love is not enough. You need knowledge, you need wisdom, you need support, you need community. It's not enough. And our business is about changing family trees. We don't changing family trees like you're saying to feed forward. We're saying we can sprout new leaves and new branches that are healthy, that we don't have to continue repeating these relational things that are not serving anybody, that are causing destruction. And we have them, even if we weren't foster adopted ourselves, we have things that we can grow new that we don't have to repeat old patterns. So it is about feeding forward. It is about changing the trajectory of these children's lives who had a hard first start. They don't have to have the same family tree trajectory that they started out with.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say forging new neural pathways. That was going to be a name. Those fire wire together, those brain cell stuff.
Well, you know, I love that stuff too. I just don't want to get too brainy. The visual though of changing the family tree is powerful. Yeah,
that's the whole thing, isn't it? That's, you know, what I loved. I didn't pick up on the point that you made earlier on about the fact that there is always hope. And you've got a picture behind you, isn't it? It says light or something. I can't read quite what it's. What does it say there?
It says be the light.
Be the light, yeah. Be the light, yeah. Be the light. That's the spirit, right?
That is the spirit.
So for people of faith, that's the faith in the faith is the light.
Yeah, the picture is actually from Matthew 5, where Jesus said, "We're the light of the world." So be the light. And we've all been in dark places where we needed somebody else to shine that light for us.
Yeah. I was talking about somebody to this this morning actually, and we were talking about the trauma rabbit hole. It kind of like it gets darker the further you go down it. So what's needed is 180-degree about turn for me, and look back to the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's good.
So I'm just conscious of time here. Are there any final points that you'd like to sum up with, or draw this to a close?
You know, Simon, I'm really thankful for the opportunity to share and to connect with you and to share with your audience. Obviously, I shared earlier that our many families that come to us are in distress and crisis and very much hurting in a dark place. And then you have stories like yours where you had a wonderful childhood and you didn't really have this pain that came from adoption till much later in life. Every story matters, and there are threads of all of our stories that are similar, and finding those commonalities so that we can be strengthened and learn from each other is really important. And it doesn't matter where that pain and loss emerges in your story or your child's story, there is hope.
Yeah,
there is hope.
There always is hope, and I'm conscious that of the story that I like to share on the fact that there's always hope, to kind of because I know that my story is quite an easy one, you know. But the lady that inspired me out of my semi-darkness. A lot of my darkness was to do with business, actually, and there was some darkness around the adoption stuff. But she wanted to be adopted because she was being sexually abused by her dad, and that didn't happen. She went through some tough stuff, and then she had some big insights, and she came out of it and now inspires others. So, like me. So if somebody can come back from that, they can come back from anything. And that's why the reason for me, that's the reason that there's always hope.
Yeah, if things look dark, the story's not over.
That's a great place to finish. So if you're interested in checking out more about what Jenni and her organization does, then check it out in the check out the show notes. There'll be links to her their website and the socials, so you can connect and find out more about what they do. And yeah, what would you say? Biopsycho social history intake. What was the word?
Biopsychosocial assessment.
Assessment. Yeah. Then Jenni and her team really know what they're doing. So check them out if it's made any sense to you whatsoever. Thank you very much for coming on, Jenni.
Simon, thank you. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thanks a lot, listeners. See you again soon.